Take my hand. I'll lead you into death. By a whispering in the shadows. On AO3. Episode 3. Chapter 3. Katsuki Bakugou woke up in the morning of his first day of his second year in UA, sweating and breathing erratically, scorch burns into his clean cheeks. Not the way he had envisioned beginning his year of hero training. 2 hours later, and his hands were still shaking as he attempted to put out his dye. After 5 futile minutes, he eventually decided he didn't need it, giving up and flinging across the room with a grunt. He took a few deep breaths, willing himself to calm down. The worst part wasn't that he couldn't even remember the nightmare that had fucked with his day. Gradually, his eyes drifted towards the corner of the orderly room, landing on a splash of green. He took a final deep breath before making his way to the corner, lifting a small candle and lighting it with the flickering of his sparks. His hands brushed the smooth picture, looking deep into the bright emerald green eyes. He stood silent for a moment, until a loud crash and laughter flowed from the hallway, breaking him from his daze. Focusing his eyes towards the door, another moment passed as his racing heart subsided, and he pulled himself to give the boy in the picture one more look. He cleared his throat. Second year of UA. One step closer to becoming a hero. Let's fucking do this, Deku. He whispered before heading out, grabbing his bag along the way. He was almost at the door when he spun back, snatching the flies that lay strewn across the desk and shoving them back into their folder. He almost dropped them again as Shitty Hair rammed into his side on his way towards the kitchen, the redhead earning a growl. Whoa, easy, Tiger. He joked, jumping away from Katsuki's sparking hands. Just wanted to say good morning. Kirishima looked like he was about to continue, his head tilted in contemplation before dropping it and carrying on with the blonde in silence. Lips thinned. Damn bastard, able to read him too well. His fucking cheery-ass personality returned quickly enough, once greeted by the others in the common area. Most of the class was down and dressed by the time they made it. Katsuki's own schedule running behind, though there was always one or two sprinted across the class at the last second. Ponytails gracefully made them all breakfast, which normally Katsuki would have huffed about. She made eggs well enough. However, he was sort of too out of it to give a fuck, merely nodding at her in thanks, with a small grunt as she sat in her usual place. Though the second-year dorms were slightly larger than the first-year areas, the layout was pretty much the same, so it didn't take long during their move in the week for a system to take place. Katsuki allowed himself to relax amidst the annoying hums of his classmates chattering, gradually feeling more like himself. He wasn't sure if his, friends chose not to engage with him simply because he's usually more crankier in the mornings anyways, or because they could sense something was up. But either way, he was secretly grateful. Katsuki presumed it was the latter, when as soon as he felt his own mood brighten, as much as it could anyways, they were on him like fucking dogs. Bakugou! Sparky's voice sang from ahead of him as they made their way towards homeroom. He looked up to see the blonde idiot walking backwards, next to Ibex, smiling broadly at him. How are you feeling about this year, eh? Bet you're ready to kick some ass! He cheered, nearly tripping over himself before Shinsou hauled him up by his bag straps. Katsuki rolled his eyes at the two blushing idiots who wouldn't just get their fucking shit together. Morons. Any answer he had was cut off as a short body barreled into his side, her arm sliding over his shoulder. Of course he's ready to kick ass. We all are. Roundface chirped, squeezing him so tightly he almost choked. She was small and lean, but damn was she strong as fuck. We're all in our second year of hero training, guys. I was literally so pumped. These villains don't stand a chance. She exclaimed with so much confidence Katsuki couldn't stop his own dangerous smirk from playing on his face. Damn fucking straight, Floaty, he growled, determination filling his bones. The two of them earned a few cheers and hollers from the classmates as they entered the classroom. You guys are way too enthusiastic for the morning. Ibags grumbled out, sinking into his chair behind Katsuki's. Katsuki took his own seat, rolling his eyes as their little group gathered around them. Why they had to gather at his seat, he didn't fucking know, but whatever. He secretly liked that they had come to him so he could be included. knowing full well his petty fucking annoyance would keep him from sitting elsewhere. Ears scoffed as she made her way over, whacking Shinsou across the back of the head with a familiar folder. Katsuki barked a laugh at the indigent noise that came out of Eyebags, who flipped him off. "You're only tired because you stayed up watching dark web conspiracies about Reaper," Jiro said, jumping onto the purple-haired boy's tablet. That got the rest of the class interested in the conversation. "No, guys, seriously, Reaper is messing with my head. They're a ghost!" Invisalign piped up, inviting a round of his classmates' own conspiracies. The girl had a point. Honestly, the whole thing pissed Katsuki the fuck off. He usually enjoyed puzzles, but this was ridiculous. He felt like he was in some big, fucked version of hide-and-seek, and Katsuki hated losing. "What do you think, Ida? You have the most thoughts on the serial killer among us." Jiro bantered, earning boisterous jeers and laughter from the room. "That was one time. Honestly, you guys need to let this go." Glasses sputtered, chopping his arms. Katsuki was still caught on to what Jiro had said. "Not a murderer," he mumbled to himself, catching the attention of those closest to him. "What was that, Blasty?" Roundface asked, tilting her head. Katsuki shifted in his seat. "Just something fucking Aizawa said the first night, about Reaper not being a simple murderer." "Oh, yeah. He was very adamant about the fact that Reaper is a highly skilled assassin or something, so we shouldn't treat it like an everyday villain." Hiroshima joined in, shivering slightly. "Honestly, the whole thing kind of freaks me out. Like, we don't even know if they're a boy or a girl, or, like, what age they are. Totally not manly." "I think they're a boy." "Fucking grape juice," listed voice came from behind Shinsou. Mina Naraka bristled at his opinion, turning on the boy instantly. "Oh yeah?" Pinky sang-song cruelly. "What makes you so sure?" The purple prick ignored the dangerous signs the two girls were setting off, simply scoffed, crossing his arms. Hello, no boobs," he said, inclining a round of arguments Katsuki was not in the mood for. Sarah cut them off with his own opinion. "I mean, dude's got a point." The girls wheeled their fierce gaze on the weird elbow idiot, who put his hands up in defense. "Like, in the least, I'm looking at the dude's chest to see if they have boobs way possible. You have to admit their structure looks more boyish." "But they're so short, or at least that's what it looks like. Oh, and nimble and flexible? It could just be the armor making them look like a boy." The invisible one tried to argue. "That is true, but boys can also be nimble and flexible. Just look at Ojiro, and Kurigo from Class B, or even Aizawa-sensei." Ponytail piped up. "Besides, height doesn't determine sex. I myself am quite tall for a girl. And then there's Mineta." "So in reality, we're right back to the fact that you cannot guess their gender. Ergo, it means it's unknown." She continued, ever the voice of reason. "We shouldn't trouble ourselves in something professional detectives couldn't figure out." Everyone seemed to sober up. At that, all the conspiracies and ideas going out the window. "But," Kaminari spoke up after a moment, "aren't we meant to be helping? Isn't that why we're on the case?" Though he knew Sparky meant well, Katsuki barely retained a growl of annoyance before their teacher was interrupting them. "Both Kirishima and Yaruzu are correct in their observations." Aizawa spoke out clearly, startling everyone in the class. Usually they were on top of their game when it came to being seated before Aizawa entered the room, but clearly this case has them all fucked up. The more Katsuki observed the room, the more he realized this. Not one desk was missing in the case files that were given. Some had it buried beneath their books, some hidden on their laps, others completely bare and open, the only things on their desk. In any case, Katsuki quickly understood how absorbent his class was becoming, himself included. When he thought back to the week of move-in, there wasn't a day that went by where he didn't hear talk of the case, see the bright red lettering glattering at him with folder or two. "Well, you have been technically placed on the case to help out. Like I said in your briefing, this doesn't mean you go running your sleep schedules trying to figure out things that we already decided are unnecessary." Aizawa deadpanned, forcing a few targeted individuals to shift in their seats. "That is for the detectives on the case, and them only." Their dedication, their entire lives to things like this. You gremlins are still students, which means your prime responsibility and focus should be on education and preparing yourself for the hero world. He stood out of his sleeping bag, cracking his neck before taking a seat at the edge of the desk, bored expression still on his face, though they could all see the tension in his eyes. So yes, you're on the case, but merely as another set of eyes. You are not detectives. You will not find something that we don't already know, and thinking that you will is only a waste of time, and absurdly arrogant. This is not me underestimating your skills. This is simply me being both realistic and logical. If I hear even a whisper of your sleep schedules being disrupted due to your own research, you'll be in detention before you could say Reaper. He began, massaging the side of his head, as if this conversation were already giving him a headache. Fucking drama queen. I will answer 3 questions and that is it. You have 1 minute to decide, starting now. A round of frantic whispering began, quickly coming up with 3 questions the majority were cautious about. Katsuki had many questions of his own, though. His mind wasn't quite there enough to gather them into words, opting to listen in this round. Time. Ida, first question. Go. Sensei demanded gruffly. Right. Yes, Sensei. Our first query would have to be on who you think the Grim Reaper is working for. Do you believe they are simply a single operation, working with an unidentified villain organization or perhaps with the League itself? Per what are documents provided with? Classes said, intently and straightforward. Ida had grown on Katsuki over the year, the Stain incident bringing them frantically closer together. But there were many things about the guy that Katsuki just found growling. Really, he could not see what Roundface saw in him. Something tinged in the back of Katsuki's mind irritably, like an itch you can't scratch. Well, something I have noticed is that Reaper has never targeted a League member. Now, whether that is entirely coincidental, one cannot be sure. Personally, I have never believed in coincidences. His answer is his usual monotone voice. But sir, Naraka spoke up, raising her hand. If the Reaper was truly working with the League, wouldn't they have used them by now? We're facing off against them pretty times, and the first time most of us heard tale of the assassin was a week ago. Surely with their abilities, All For One or Shigaraki would have thought to throw him into the fight, especially if their aim was to kill All Might at the beginning. She finished. It was an opinion Katsuki had discussed with the brunette on multiple occasions. It was also an opinion he couldn't help but agree with. Hell, Katsuki was at their damn base and didn't even catch a whisper of the assassin. Aizawa was silent a moment, taking the girl in, before he gave one of his rare, and frankly fucking terrifying smiles. I'm glad you think that way, Uraraka. Though I don't believe in coincidence. Usually Reaper being a part of the League of Villains, logically, doesn't make sense. I also don't believe that they would be working alone. But this is just my opinion. He cleared his throat, shifting on the table. I would say they are working with an unknown organization, which itself is an unnerving idea. He mumbled out the last bit almost to himself, before shaking his head slightly. Anyways, next question. Sarah, go. Oh, right, Tape Arm stumbled over his initial words at being addressed, before getting his thoughts straight. The fact that Sensei still had this effect on him was almost laughable. Almost because Katsuki knew the effect was mutual class around. So, what quirk do you think he or they have? Ability and speed base, or teleportation are my top guesses. Aizawa answered, seeming almost annoyed by both the questions and what he had to give on it. Last one, make it count. Bakugou, go. Katsuki nearly jumped out of his seat when dark eyes turned to him. He hadn't really been paying attention to the question his classmates wanted to ask, though with all of them having turned to watch him, they probably knew that too, and were waiting to see what he wanted to know. He sat for a moment before a question struck him, one that had been bothering him for a while, simply from observations. What's your opinion on the Grim Reaper? He asked, his voice carrying clearly across the classroom. Though the question seemed broad, Katsuki knew Aizawa understood him. He wanted to know what the name did to their teacher, how the case had affected him. He wanted to know why their teacher, who knew how capable his class was, how much they had faced and overcome, why he didn't want them getting so involved. Aizawa kept eye contact with Katsuki, not answering for what seemed like a lifeline, before he looked away. Honestly, he started, pausing briefly. They completely terrify me. Katsuki's eyes widened at the admission, along with most of his classmates. The bell going off had them breaking out into their supper, as Aizawa simply went to leave the room, pausing at the door. Ida. Call roll, and then head to assembly. We get to attend assembly this year? Mina joked, trying to lighten the mood. Of course. Hobo-sensei responded, a glint in his eyes. Why wouldn't you? As he left the room, there was a breakout of chatter as Ida called out their names one by one. Eventually they got up, messing around, the tension dispacing, as they headed to the assembly. Go. Bakugou. Katsuki's head ripped around the sound of glasses, irritating voice calling out to him. Answer the roll, Bakugou. You can't fucking see me, glasses? Fuck off. Katsuki growled, shouldering his bag as he went to leave, ignoring the idiot's stuttering. Careful, Bakugou. Don't want to piss off the murder hunter. Jiro joked again, her laughter drifting down the hall as Ida chased her with a remitteral hand. Katsuki didn't find it funny, however, freezing suddenly at the realization. Stain, he whispered to himself. His hands still hadn't stopped shaking. It was dark in the room. He didn't like the dark. He didn't like not being able to see, to hear. He didn't like knowing that there could be something out there. Something he couldn't see. Something that could see him. Was ready for him. He wanted to go home. Where was home? Where was he? Home was pain, green, warm, blood, dark, blunt spikes, pain, hurt, fireworks, crying, pain, green, pain, screaming, blue, yellow, red, screaming, dark, metal, red eyes, pain. Where was he? He was home. This was home. Right. Right. He did something. Something wrong. Something bad. Something to upset Papa. He couldn't remember what it was. That was good. That meant he was being good. He didn't like the dark. He didn't like the smell. Metal? Metal? Oh, blood, was he... Yes, he did something bad. What did he do? He couldn't remember. Bright lights. It hurt. He wanted the dark back for a second. Only a second. Then, the thought gone. Red eyes peered down at him. Now, are we ready to behave? Katsuki was observant. He was observant every day Aizawa had warned them not to be. He couldn't help it. He couldn't get Reaper out of his head. There he had been, where Shin was attacking. He knowed it. No, he had not seen them. Not completely, anyways. But he knows it was him. He couldn't stop the scene playing in his head. Stain had cut him deeply across the cheek, so deep that he still had a scar. He was flickering out of his fucking disgusting lizard tongue, ready to paralyze Katsuki, when a knife was thrown from nowhere, cutting the tip of it off. At the time, Katsuki had assumed it was Todoroki, even though he fucking knew the boy looked just as surprised as he was, and was standing beside Stain, where he shouldn't have been able to throw anything. Katsuki knew this all the time, but so much has happened after that, it disappeared into the back of his mind. Now, however, now was the only thing he could think of, because there was something else that night, again. At this time, he shoved to being not important, forgotten amongst the mess of events. He had seen someone move on his left, fast in the shadows. So fast, he presumed it was Ida, but Glasses was still paralyzed at the time. So then, the only option was icy hot, but there was no ice that followed. And Katsuki fucking knows Todoroki was unable to go that fast without it. But he wasn't thinking. He was thinking now, though, and he could see it, clear as fucking day. It had to be Reaper. He had no real proof, no evidence to back him, except for one of Reaper's victims being found in Hosu a day later, which was buried deep in his files. Maybe staring at their photos so long was messing with his head. There was a strange nagging feeling that had been fucking with him since the day he was given the case. The day the Grim Reaper was planted in his head. Finally, he figured it out. The only issue with this belief was a single question that blasted through his mind. Why the fuck did they save Katsuki? Ooh, interesting. Interesting. Next chapter is definitely going to be broken up. Next chapter is long. Next chapter is long, so I'm going to break it up. It's also an excuse for me to do shorter episodes because I need to, what's it called? That one. That's the only one that I'm going to do because I need to get shit set up for before I leave for New Year's and stuff like that because I do not have my extended breaks and stuff like that, which I need to start getting better at having and not ruining them all. But a lot of breaks and a lot of a lot of vacations piled up in 1 month, and here I am struggling. And here you are watching me struggle. Never do 3 days. Never do 3 videos daily. It will eat you up if you want to start podficking. Do not do that to yourself. Really, don't. If you hate yourself, go ahead. But even my worst enemy shouldn't have to suffer through this. Yet I do. Shut up, I'm not gonna take a break. I enjoy this as dramatic as I'm being. Anyways, and I could take a break whenever the fuck I want. But anyways, this was really interesting. I really like the one part where we see Izuku's point of view. I hope my frantic way, the way I was saying his thoughts and stuff like that, was good enough to convey what the author was trying to do. There was a lot of crossed out words, and I always have trouble doing the crossed out words because, like, do I say them? Do I not? Sometimes I do say them. Sometimes I don't say them. It depends because, again, crossed out words, they're really hard to interpret voice-wise. And I interpret it in different ways myself. That one I decided that I was gonna say it all, but be it jumbled to the point where it's like, what is actually being said kind of situation, which I think really goes to hand on how those crossed out words, I think in that scene is supposed to interpret the fact that Izuku is having jumbled up emotions. He's thinking about what home is, right? Green eyes, red eyes, that's home. But that's also danger, but that's also this, but that's also that. Like, we jumbled up emotions and feelings because his psyche is fighting with himself, in a sense, right? We know that one of the tags is, what's it called? So first of all, one of the tags is implied/reference sexual assault, so I'm a little worried. Another tag is psychological torture, kidnapping, torture. I think brainwashing was one of them, and I don't think they mean... brainwashing, there it is. And I don't think they mean Shinsou type brainwashing. I think they mean psychological warfare, psychological brainwashing, right? Where you make someone do something out of fear, out of obligation, because you psychologically have broken them down till they do your bidding, which is something that happens. And a lot of the times when the mind goes through so hard of a traumatic event, and especially if it is continuous torture and psychological torture, right? Your mind breaks. Your mind is going to do whatever the fuck it can to make that torture stop, to make it end. And what do? Comply with what the other person wants of you. A lot of the times that happens. And because of that, after torture and torture and after psychological torture, you start to believe the lies that your brain has made up because it's easier to believe the lies and play into this role so that the torture and the harm does not continue than try to fight it. The mind is resilient, but at the same time, the mind is resilient and has a lot of pathways, and not pathways, but a lot of coping mechanisms to cope with such strenuous and such hard situations. But at the same time, it can be the detriment, right? Surviving after Izuku gets obviously taken from the situation and put into an area that it's way better, it's still going to be a long road ahead to recovery because you don't simply heal from such traumatic events. It is hard, it is difficult, and it is a long journey that some people never truly go out of. If your brain has been psychologically conditioned, even to an extent of Izuku being so young, sometimes you don't get out of that. That pathway, that building block, that coding in your brain can't be uncoded. Yes, technically it can be uncoded. Anything can be uncoded, but sometimes it's too much. For example, Izuku could very well end up with PTSD that will last for him for a lifetime. Many psychological effects will stay there because unfortunately, as much as he could get out of the habit of doing what he's doing because of survival, he will always be a victim. He will always resort to that. Unfortunately, no matter what he does, he will never not be a victim. And it's the hardest thing to, come to terms with, especially if it's not like something so harsh like this. Think about it in the sense of you have been abused, right? Whether it's your friend, your lover, or your family. You will always be a survivor/victim. That is something that you will grapple with your whole life. And sometimes, part of you, if you had an option to not be a victim, it's really hard. Like, okay, I'm gonna play it in this way, because for me, it's like this. I am a victim. I had a friend who was very manipulative. And I mean manipulative in the sense of like hitting. In the sense of I was being shaped to be what she wanted me to be, and I complied because I didn't want to get hurt, right? And psychologically speaking, that's what happened, right? And as much as that pained me, as much as I am still dealing with trying to get rid of some of my horrible habits that I have because of that, if I had to choose to not be a victim again, I'm not sure I would say I wouldn't want to be a victim. I don't want to go through that again. But at the same time, you have a love-hate relationship with it sometimes. For me, it's a love-hate relationship. I don't want to always be a victim, but I've gotten so adjusted to the fact that, yeah, I will always be a victim. It's a part of me now. That losing it feels wrong. So as much as Izuku could go through all the therapy in the world, he will always be a victim. He will always have that. And sometimes you will go back in healing and you will go back to your old ways. And that's okay. Healing is not linear. I've said this so many times in my channel. Healing is not linear. It's never linear. But Izuku has a really long road ahead, and I don't even know exactly what happened to him. But judging by that short little clippet that we got of Izuku, I am heavily worried about him and his mental health, because there is no way in fucking hell that he is okay. He's probably not going to recover for years. And I mean it. Years. People who have gone through manipulation/abuse have... people who have gone through DV take years to recover. I can't even imagine psychological torture and physical torture to the point where you're being forced to do something that you don't want to do at such a young age by, I'm presuming, Izuku's father. Also, Katsuki, the reason why Ripper saved you is because he's your childhood bestie. Hashtag besties. Okay, anyways. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.